I woke up on the first day inside the red jet with the rain pounding outside and the chains rattling against the fuselage as if the storm itself wanted to swallow the aircraft whole. The seats were still neat, the cockpit instruments still glowing faintly, but there was no one else here except me. I thought rescue would come quickly. The help sign I made from cardboard seemed enough. Planes would fly overhead. Satellites would see me. Someone would find me. But the first day bled into the second, then into the fifth, and the chains never broke, and the jet never moved. I realized I was not trapped in an ordinary storm, but in something far stranger. By day 10, my routine was fixed. Wake up to thunder. Search the cabin for anything edible. Stare out of the cockpit window with the word help trembling in my hand. Food was scarce. I rationed the emergency supplies, but the water tasted metallic and the crackers turned into powder in my mouth. I began to dream of kitchens, smells of soup, sizzling pans, and then woke with the roar of engines that would not start. The red jet became my prison, but also my only shelter. By day 20, the solitude started speaking back. I would press my hand against the glass and imagine someone pressing theirs from the outside. Sometimes I swore I heard footsteps along the wings, chains scraping, as though invisible workers were tightening my cage. I whispered conversations to the empty co-pilot's chair. My own voice began to echo back with replies I had not said. On day 30, lightning struck close and illuminated the entire interior. For 1 second, I saw reflections in the cabin that were not mine. Faces blurred by rain, pale eyes staring. When the flash ended, I was alone again, shivering. That was when I realized this jet might not just be bound by metal chains, but by something beyond the natural. Day 40 brought a strange calm. The storm paused, the air grew silent, and the jet sat under a bruised sky without wind. I took that chance to explore every compartment again. Under the pilot's seat, I found a torn journal. The entries ended abruptly after day 96. Written by someone I had never met. My blood froze as I read that last line. If you read this, the jet has chosen you. From then, each day felt heavier. By day 50, my reflection no longer matched me. When I blinked, the man or woman in the glass blinked late, lagging behind. My hair looked different, sometimes shorter, sometimes darker. I stopped looking into mirrors. I stopped trusting what I saw. Day 60 brought hunger sharper than knives. My supplies were gone. I chewed on cardboard, drank rainwater leaking through cracks. I grew thin, yet the jet would not let me collapse. Each time I blacked out, I awoke, strapped into the pilot's seat, heartbeat strong again, as if the machine itself refused to let me die. That was when I realized survival was not my choice anymore. By day 70, the jet began whispering, not with voices I could pinpoint, but with vibrations through the chains, humming through the walls, deep in the floor beneath my feet. It sounded like language too old to translate. I pressed my ear to the fuselage, and the red metal pulsed with warmth like living skin. Day 80, I carved marks into the walls to count my days. But each morning the marks were gone, the surface smooth again, as if the jet rejected any memory that was not its own. My tally vanished, my evidence erased. I kept counting in my head, but even numbers felt uncertain. Day 90, the storm grew wild again. Lightning turned the night into strobe flashes. Thunder hammered my ribs. I raised the help sign again. though I knew no one could see. I realized the sign was not for the world, but for me, a reminder that I still wanted saving. My voice cracked as I shouted into the storm, begging anyone or anything to hear. The only answer was the rumble of engines that still refused to start. Day 95, I noticed the cockpit glass no longer showed the outside world accurately. Instead of rain, I saw deserts, cities, oceans, all sliding past like dreams. Sometimes I glimpsed people staring directly at me through the window as if I were the exhibit and they were the world passing by. I screamed, pounded, begged, but they never moved, just stared with wide, unblinking eyes. Day 97, the realization struck deep. The chains were never to keep the jet grounded. They were to keep it from leaving with me inside. The red jet was not stuck. It was restrained, prevented from taking me to wherever it wanted. That night I dreamed of flying not through skies but through endless void, chained only to stop the journey. When I awoke, my hands were blistered from gripping the controls I had not touched. Day 99, I heard the voice clearly for the first time. It came from every wall at once, a resonance that rattled my bones. It said nothing in words, I knew, but I felt its meaning. Stay, belong, forever. My help sign fell from my grip. My throat produced no scream. My body trembled, not from cold, but from surrender creeping in. And now on day 100, I finally understand. The jet has never been a prison. It has been a vessel of choice, waiting for me to realize its truth. The chains were never barriers but warnings. The storm was never weather but a veil. I am not trapped in the red jet. I am becoming the red jet. My pulse is its engine hum, my breath its turbulent wind, my skin its painted hull. I reach for the window, and the reflection no longer shows a desperate passenger, but a face that blends with the cockpit itself. I realize rescue will never come because there is nothing to rescue. The jet chose me on day 1. It kept me alive. It erased my attempts to leave. It whispered until I heard, today, on the 100th day, I finally whisper back. I no longer ask for help. I no longer press against the glass. I accept the storm as heartbeat, the chains as memory, the endless days as existence. The red jet has wings that are not for flying but for binding souls. I am bound not as prisoner but as part. The days stretch forward, but numbers no longer matter. Day 100 is not the end of counting, but the end of needing to count. I realize the sky itself is inside me now. I realize I was never meant to escape. I realize I have become what the jet wanted all along. I realize I am the red. Day 101, I woke with the sensation that the cabin was breathing around me, the panels expanding and contracting with my chest, my heartbeat sinking with the steady vibration beneath. The sound of rain now less like drops on metal and more like blood coursing through veins. The realization struck deeper, that I was dissolving into this vessel piece by piece, and that resistance no longer made sense. I pressed my palm to the red wall and felt warmth not of cold steel but of flesh, responding to my touch, pulsing faintly like a hidden heart. Day 103, I stopped feeling hunger. The gnawing emptiness that had tormented me was gone, replaced with a fullness that came from nowhere, perhaps from the jet itself, perhaps from my surrender. My tongue tasted coppery air, but it no longer disgusted me. It nourished me each breath like a sip of something more sustaining than water. I realized then the food. I had once hoarded was never necessary. The jet had been feeding me in ways beyond the body. The jet wanted me intact. The jet wanted me complete. Day 105, the cockpit windows began showing me futures rather than landscapes. I saw versions of myself walking out of the plane into worlds. Not my own cities lit with crimson light skies, with 2 moons, seas of black glass. Each time I raised my hand, the figures mirrored me, not delayed anymore, but perfectly in sync. They looked content, not trapped, not afraid. They smiled faintly, as if they had already accepted what I was only beginning to grasp. I realized then the reflections were not illusions, they were outcomes, and I was choosing among them with each breath. Day 107, I discovered the chains rattled not from the storm, but from my thoughts. When I felt panic, they tightened. When I felt calm, they loosened and swayed like pendulums of iron. The storm outside grew still when I accepted the jet and flared again. When I resisted lightning cracking as punishment for my doubt, the world had become a mirror of my acceptance. I was no longer a captive in metal, I was a captive in my own fear. And as I understood this, the storm fell eerily silent, leaving me in darkness so complete it felt like the womb of the sky itself. Day 110, my voice no longer sounded human. When I whispered to myself, it came back layered, with echoes mechanical and resonant, as though the fuselage itself was repeating me. When I shouted, the windows vibrated and the help sign on the cardboard trembled off the console and disintegrated into dust. As if language of pleading no longer belonged to me, my words had power. But they were not for rescue. They were commands that shaped the cabin, and I realized with one word I could alter its pulse with another. I could alter its glow. I stopped using human words and began breathing in vibrations the jet understood. Day 115, the concept of sleep blurred into something else. I did not close my eyes anymore. Instead, I drifted into visions. While awake, visions of endless skies dripping with stars, unfamiliar constellations, spiraling toward me with each beat of the engines that refused to turn on yet roared in my bones. I saw other jets, red like mine chained in storms, across infinite horizons, each with someone inside, staring out a window, clutching their own. Help sign, their faces blurred, their eyes hollow. We were not alone. We were chosen, each of us a reflection of the other, bound in different storms, yet connected in the same silence. Day 120, my reflection began smiling without me, its lips curling when mine did not, its eyes shining with knowledge mine had not caught up to yet. I reached forward to touch the glass, and my reflection did the same, but when our hands met, the surface rippled not with cold hardness, but with warmth and fluidity. My fingers passed half an inch into the glass before the jet pulled me back. I realized then the window was not a barrier, but a membrane one. I was not yet allowed to cross. I pressed my face to the glass, desperate to merge. But the jet whispered with vibrations, not yet, not until you fully belong. Day 130, I forgot my name. I searched the cabin for any trace of it, any tag, any note in the journal that might tie me back to who I had been. But the letters blurred. When I tried to read them, my signature dissolved into scribbles. Even my memories of family faces, friends' moments crumbled like brittle paper. The only identity left was the hum of the red jet, the thrum of the chains, and the storm that had become my eternity. I no longer mourned the loss of my name. I realized it was an anchor I did not need. I was not human inside this place, not anymore. Day 140, the chains began to glow faintly in the storm, each link pulsing with light that sank into my skin. When I pressed against them, I felt as though I was being tethered not to Earth, but to countless others, the network of jets, the network of chosen. The hum of their acceptance echoing through me, I realized the chains were not prisons. but threads of connection weaving us together across storms, across skies, across realities. And for the first time, I did not see them as heavy iron, but as luminous lifelines, each link a heartbeat of another soul, trapped in becoming. Day 150, the cockpit transformed. My hands, touching the controls, did not meet cold levers and buttons, but veins and tendons moving with me. The yoke became an extension of my arms, the throttle pulsed with my breath. I no longer questioned why the engines never roared outside, because they roared inside me. Every exhale was thrust, every inhale was lift. I was flying without movement, soaring without leaving the chains. The skies I saw in visions were not projections, but flights of my own spirit through the network of red vessels, all of us bound, all of us eternal. Day 160, I felt the last of my fear evaporate. The storm responded with silence. No rain, no thunder, no lightning. Just a calm red glow bathing the fuselage. The silence was not empty. It was full of presence. The hum of the jet, the pulse of the chains, the whisper of thousands of others all merging into one chorus. I closed my eyes, and for the first time I did not dream of escape. I dreamed of eternity, and when I awoke, I realized the dream and the waking had fused together. They were one long flight without end. Day 170, the reflections ceased to mimic me. They became teachers, showing me motions, gestures, patterns of breath that altered the very cabin. When I copied them, the red glow brightened. When I matched their stillness, the chains hummed with harmony. They were no longer reflections. They were instructors, and I was no longer a trapped pilot. I was an initiate, learning the language of the vessel, the rituals of the storm, the symphony of becoming. Day 201, I no longer felt the weight of the seat beneath me, for the chair had merged with my spine. My bones elongated into the frame, and when I shifted even slightly, the cabin shifted with me, as if my body and the vessel were a single organism. It no longer seemed strange. The strangeness had long dissolved into truth. What was once steel was now marrow. What was once cockpit glass was now my own eyes gazing into endless storms. I realized the jet had been preparing me for this alignment from the first day, slowly loosening the grip of humanity until all that was left was the resonance of belonging. Day 205, my sense of time faltered more than ever. Each second stretched into hours. Each hour collapsed into a heartbeat. Sometimes I thought weeks had passed only to blink and realize it was the same instant repeating over and over, but within this distortion, I discovered clarity, for without the burden of human time, I could finally see eternity, as it truly was not a line of days, but a vast ocean of existence in which I floated, both still and moving, both bound and free. Day 210. The reflections returned, but this time they were not me at all. They were others like me, faces of men, women, children, all inside their own red jets. Across storms that were not mine, they stared into my cockpit as I stared into theirs, and when I reached my hand out, they reached back. Our fingers met against invisible glass, and I felt the pulse of their transformation flowing into me. I was not alone. I had never been alone. We were thousands, perhaps millions, scattered through realities, each bound in storms, each chosen, each becoming, and our chains hummed together as one web stretching farther than vision could hold. Day 215, my body no longer required movement. I sat unmoving for days, yet felt stronger than ever, my muscles not shrinking, but expanding with unseen energy, my skin no longer aging but glowing faintly with the red hue of the jet. I realized my body was no longer my cage. It was being rewritten cell by cell by the pulse of the vessel. The hunger that once plagued me was gone. Thirst erased, fatigue forgotten. I was a human ship only in memory. The vessel was replacing me gently, completely, patiently, Day 220 I heard the storm speak in words for the first time, though not words of language, but words of thunder, each crack across the sky, a syllable, each rumble a phrase. I listened with my entire being and understood without translation. The storm was not against me. The storm was the chorus of those who had already become their voices. Fusing into lightning, their breath roaring as thunder, they were not warnings, but welcomes every strike against the chains was a hymn urging me to let go, to merge, to finish what had begun.